All right, I'm David Palmer, and I'm here with Chandler Blacker. He's a budding data analyst and scientist, and he's here to walk us through the analysis that he's done for with that involves data wrangling and visualization. So, Chandler, maybe start off by just letting us know what is your overarching research question, and why did you choose that question?
Basically, my question is I'm looking into the relationship between MLB teams and how much they're paying their players. So the question I wanted to answer was how much a team should expect to spend to meet their win goals.
Okay, yeah, and usually tell me a little bit of where you got the data from, and then oftentimes data is messy. So, what did you have to do to prepare the data for analysis?
Yeah, so
And you can walk us through the code too if you want to show us some of the highlights of the prepping that you had to do.
um, so my data set comes from Kaggle. It was somebody that had kind of researched into MLB payrolls and figured out exactly how much they were spending on their injured players and their active players, people who are actually playing. And they came up with this data set that talked about the average age of the players, how much each team was paying each season, and it goes through how many wins each team has and everything. So using this data set, there was a lot that was already in place for me, which was very convenient. Um, I ended up building a graph talking about how much active money each team was spending, meaning how much of their money is being spent on players that are actually on the field helping them win, rather than players who were injured or um, buried money like major league players that were playing in minor leagues but still being paid by major league team. But essentially, in order to kind of format the data the way I needed, I had to do a pivot longer, kind of showing where this money was being spent and helping me understand a little better for each type of pay where that money was going. Um, and all of the columns were in strings, so I had to turn them into numbers and then just kind of format it a little bit differently for each graph I wanted to create.
Okay. What's something you learned or an insight you gained? Maybe something you learned or had to research further as you kind of got into this data set that you didn't understand about baseball or the system of pay in baseball.
I would say that the biggest one was probably this buried section that I didn't realize that the major league teams were still paying for the minor league players and how some teams will bury a lot of the money that they have in these players. The average isn't too high, but sometimes it does get lazy. But that was one of the things that I didn't understand too much, and I researched into active money. And then um, just kind of understanding how these players are being paid, because sometimes the payment is kind of deferred, so they don't make as much money now. They make more of it later. So I kind of had to look into how these players were actually being paid each season.
Okay. And if, given that your overarching research question, if you could summarize and say 30, 45 seconds, what are the top three or four answers or highlights that you got from this study?
So one thing that I found really interesting when I looked first at the data was when teams spend over about $200 million, they almost never lose more than 80 games.
Hmm.
And there's 162 games in an MLB season. And usually teams that win over half of those could win the championship. They're considered good teams that like easily could go on and win in the playoffs. So I thought it was interesting that there were zero outliers and zero data points that had spent more than 200 million and oh, like they always won more than half of their games. But another conclusion that I came to was I feel like this graph was really helpful to visualize it. That um, if you want to win more games, you basically just have to spend more money. There's not a lot of avoiding it because at the bottom here we have the different win groups. Like these are teams that win between 70 and 79 games. And on average, they had to spend $82 million on the players that were on the field. This is ignoring the injured players and buried money.
Okay.
Yeah. And then the very, very best teams spent an average of way more at 231 million.
Well, isn't the league set up rules and structure to try to like I guess level the playing field, so to speak, than to kind of put a constraint on just having teams buy the championship essentially?
Baseball is one of the most interesting leagues in this because they have very, very few rules over that. Like NBA teams are all given an exact amount of money that they can spend, and there's very little variation. But in baseball, richer teams simply pay their players more. And so that was what made this so interesting to go into for MLB teams, is that they are allowed to just spend more money. But is it really worth the extra $90 million to win an extra 10 games? And that's where the team owners kind of have to decide exactly how much they want to spend.
And then, like you said, this is just for the players that are on the field. So if is an injured player, they've made a big investment that gets subtracted out of these numbers. So
Exactly.
they may have made a bad guess or just had some bad luck
Yeah.
that
I
okay.
mean, because of this, it's important to realize that you still need a skilled team of baseball analysts to win a championship. I mean, not every player is worth what they're being paid, so you still have to analyze and decide where to spend your money. But spending more will generally give you more wins every time.
Okay. So next steps, if you were to keep going with this analysis or with looking deeper into this topic, what would be your kind of next steps? Where would you look next to enhance your analysis?
I would be interested in looking into specific teams and their history, how they've been spending their money, especially more successful teams. Um, I created one more graph here that talks about what percentage of their money is being spent on the players actively on the field. And so generally we still see this line going upward where teams that spend a higher percentage of their money, even if they didn't have a lot to spend on players on the field, they will still win more generally. The relationship is a bit more rough, but generally it's true. So I would like to look into that a little bit more, where maybe there's a team that hasn't spent quite as much money as others, yet has still been really successful because all of their money is being spent on the players on the field.
Kind of moral of the story, keep your players active. If
Yeah.
you've invested all this money to keep not active, but keep them healthy.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you, Chandler.